Mixed martial arts is weird. That's it. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. No, it's weird in that the #1 fighter isn't always the champion. Like, if you win the Super Bowl in the NFL, you're the best team in everyone's eyes. But sometimes in MMA, there are fighters so dominant and champions on such shaky footing in comparison that even with the gold around their waist, everybody knows who really runs the weight class. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point. A massive thank you to our Channel Hall of Fame members for their continued support. And these are 10 times a division was ruled by someone who wasn't champ. Number 10, Yves Edwards. We're going to start this list with a wholly unique scenario compared to the rest of the entries. In the case of Yves Edwards, there was no champion that fans felt he superseded despite not holding the gold. There was no champion, period. By 2004, the UFC's lightweight division was in complete shambles. After contract issues, the first and only champion 155 had ever known, Jens Pulver, was stripped of the gold. And a year later, the UFC would try to re-establish the title only for BJ Penn and Kal Uno to draw, leaving it vacant. For the next 1,324 days, there would simply be no lightweight title in the UFC. Competing on the prelims of that ill-fated Penn Uno vacant championship bout was Yves Edwards, who would submit Rich Clemente, Edwards' second victory in the promotion. He'd follow that up with another impressive win on the prelims against Eddie Ruiz. A one-fight trip overseas to Shudo would see Edwards defeated by Kawajiri, but upon his return to the UFC, he'd earned 2 more victories, now putting him on a 4-fight win streak in the promotion's lightweight division. He would next be paired with hot hand Josh Thompson, who was unbeaten at the time and had earned 2 straight victories in the UFC's lightweight division. They might have been fighting on the prelims, but to anybody who knew the UFC, this bout was unofficially going to crown the lightweight division's champion. Edwards would earn a first-round knockout in spectacular fashion via flying head kick. Earning his 5th straight in the division and leaving no doubt who the UFC champion was, regardless of the status of the belt. Number 9, Renan Barao. For 534 days, Renan Barao held interim UFC gold. That's the record. To put that in perspective, Tom Aspinall won't pass that number until April 28th. Where he and Tom will very likely differ is that Barao was forced to defend interim gold twice before finally being promoted to the undisputed king of the bantamweights. But he very much was already. For as great as Dominic Cruz had been, especially carrying over from the WEC where he'd already had 2 successful defenses, and then in the UFC added challengers Uriah Faber and Demetrius Johnson to his accolades, by the time that Barao was given the title following a groin injury that would force Cruz out of their unification bout, the Dominator hadn't fought in 828 days. Again, to use the Aspinall Jones situation for perspective, it was 623 days between when Jon won the heavyweight title and fighting Stipe. So Cruz's absence played a huge factor in Barao's uncrowned king status. That, and he earned interim gold on an 8-year unbeaten streak with 30 wins and was just wrecking everybody. While Renan would have an all-time crash out losing the gold to Dillashaw, there's no doubt for a few years he was the man at 135. Number 8, Tom Aspinall. Hey, speaking of Tom, let's talk about that. There are quite a few fans who are now entirely exhausted by the Tom Aspinall, Jon Jones situation, and that's a testament to how badly his undisputed title bout is needed. It is getting tiring. Sadly, it's looking more and more like Tom will just end up being upgraded to undisputed, never having that unification bout with Jon, meaning we'll never probably get the answer to which heavyweight champion is actually the greatest in the world right now. Don't even get me started on Ngannou leaving, that's a whole other facet of this, but there's no doubt that many have felt arguably defending interim champion Aspinall has a truer right to claim of the division's top dog than current champ Jones. While Jon did impressively defeat Cyril Gane to take the gold, afterwards he had a long absence from the cage and then decided to skip over Tom to easily defeat Stipe Miocic, coming off a near 4-year layoff at 42 years old. Meanwhile, Aspinall destroyed divisional boogeyman Sergey Pavlovich, the guy many thought Jones should have originally fought for the vacant title, and the perennial heavyweight contender Curtis Blades.
I'm the best heavyweight in the world. Prove me wrong, Jon.
If you just compare their heavyweight achievements side by side without any other context, there's a good argument for Tom over Jon, and a lot of fans have taken it. Number 7, Valentina Shevchenko. Strawweight proved that tough can be a great way of establishing a new division in the UFC. Flyweight proved sometimes it can be complicated. The issue at 125 was that unlike 115, already established stars were waiting in the wings once the inaugural champion had been crowned. While the finale left many wondering if seasoned standout Sijara Eubanks, who was forced out of the tournament final semi-final from a bad weight cut would have defeated season winner Nico Montano, there was a far bigger name that loomed over the new title. Frickin' Valentina Shevchenko, the super popular former bantamweight title contender who arguably should have been given the nod by the judges and awarded that gold, made it known months before the show that she'd be headed to flyweight. So before a single episode aired, everyone assumed that Valentina would take over 125. Just 2 months after Montano earned inaugural flyweight gold on shaky ground, Shev made her introduction to the division in one of the most brutal beatdowns in UFC history.
Flyweight division, say hello to your worst nightmare.
Add in a long delay for various medical issues from Montano, and accusations of ducking Valentina, the division's uncrowned queen, were being thrown around.
Do you feel like she's trying to avoid you?
Yes, if you don't want to fight, you just have to leave the belt. You cannot hold it.
When their scheduled bout fell apart on fight week because Nico was hospitalized, the Bullet, the UFC, and the fans were completely fed up, stripping the new champion before ever even defending, and placing Valentina in an immediate vacant title bout against the also super popular Joanna Strawweight, which she won. It weirdly didn't even feel like flyweight was really a thing prior to Shevchenko finally taking the helm, but it shows the grip she had on 125. Number 6. Khabib Nurmagomedov. In the 6th straight UFC victory for Khabib Nurmagomedov since his promotional debut, the dominant Dagestani would 30-27 lightweight number 5 Rafael dos Anjos. Khabib was now 22-0 and just beat a very well-established talent in the top 5. Rumblings of Khabib being championship material had already begun, and with the win, Nurmagomedov was right on the cusp of the title picture. He would next be paired with ultra-popular Donald Cerrone, but blow his knee out right after signing for the bout and wouldn't see the cage again for a whole 2 years due to a series of injuries. A year into his extended absence, though, the man he'd so thoroughly defeated in his last bout went ahead and won himself the lightweight title. While fans realized Khabib didn't have claim to the championship, given how dominant he was against RDA, it was kind of hard to take the champion seriously, knowing that a better fighter was simply unable to compete at the time. Once Khabib finally returned, he would frustratingly be paired with Daryl Horcher due to, and you're not going to believe this, a scheduled bout with Tony Ferguson falling through.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer.
A few months later, RDA would drop the title to Eddie Alvarez. Under any other circumstances, Khabib would be competing for the gold next. In fact, he was meant to. But Conor McGregor was the biggest thing since Jesus invented Wi-Fi, and so Nurmagomedov was relegated to the prelims that night that Conor became double champ. The idea that Khabib was the greatest lightweight in the world would only continue to grow stronger until he finally took the gold from the dominant force that was Al Iaquinta. Number 5. Georges St. Pierre. Granting title shots to down-on-their-luck fighters via the tough redemption season really shouldn't have worked out. As weekly TV, it was fine, but nobody expected the winners to do anything with their championship opportunities. Case in point, Travis Lutter, who missed weight and then got choked by Anderson Silva. Somehow, the other season winner, Matt Serra, would pull off a gigantic upset and dethrone Georges St. Pierre, though.
I lived my Rocky movie right there. And it was even better than Rocky, because Rocky went the distance. I took this guy out.
GSP had only recently dethroned greatest welterweight of all time, Matt Hughes. And so Serra, who nobody expected to be able to beat Hughes or GSP in a rematch, was made coach for a season of tough opposite Hughes with a title fight to conclude the season. But Serra would have to withdraw, leading to an interim title bout between Hughes and St. Pierre, a title that held more weight than the real one. GSP would again defeat his rival, setting up what most assumed would be a one-sided beatdown of champion Serra in the unification bout. Could Matt prove everybody wrong again?
I'm guessing not.
No, he would be stomped like everybody expected. Number 4. Shogun Rua. Pride FC's decision to make very few of their champions' bouts actually count as title defenses was perfect grounds to breed a scenario where fans felt that maybe another was at the top of the heap. It happened with perhaps the promotion's greatest and most established champion, Vanderlei Silva. Vanderlei would shockingly lose via decision to Ricardo Arona in the semifinal of the 2005 middleweight GP, a non-title bout. In the finale, Silva's teammate Shogun Rua, the tournament's standout, would knock out Arona and immediately throw into question who exactly was the world's best middleweight. Now, Vandy would reestablish himself over Arona in his next bout, but the prospect of Rua's true claim to the throne loomed large. Things got even more complicated when Silva was KO'd by Dan Henderson and lost the title prior to the UFC merger. Meanwhile, Shogun, but for a freak injury, had been perfect since the tournament. When new champion Henderson came into the UFC and lost the unification bout with Rampage Jackson, a man Shogun had KO'd KO'd in the middleweight GP, it further established the narrative that the true best 205er on the planet was Rua, which is why it was such a massive upset when he would lose his UFC debut shockingly to Forrest Griffin, because for many during that period, he was light heavyweight's true number one. Number 3, Chris Cyborg. I can't even begin to tell you how badly the UFC botched the launch of women's featherweight. The entire point of the division was that they had the most dominant force in women's MMA history under contract in Chris Cyborg, and she was being forced to compete in meaningless catchweight bouts.
Why don't they just make a 145 division? Why force you to cut 5 more pounds, a division that doesn't exist, just to prove some kind of point?
And so the UFC finally decided, this is dumb, let's make a whole division for her specifically. And they did. And then they decided not to wait for her to be ready to crown the inaugural champion because, hey, we gotta headline this February pay-per-view with some kind of championship bout. While Cyborg loomed over Holly Holm and Jermaine Durandamy from the audience, like final boss Shang Tsung sitting in the background in Mortal Kombat, GDR would very controversially, with several instances of strikes after the bell, earn the title everybody already knew before they stepped into the cage belonged to Chris. So you've got a fight that never should have taken place anyway, a winner that everybody thought cheated and shouldn't have earned the belt, but the icing on the cake would be Durandamy's refusal to grant Cyborg a title shot because she didn't feel comfortable competing against someone who'd failed a PED test 6 years earlier.
And Jermaine's sake, I think she knew she wasn't the champion, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's fair. I mean, USADA's in place now, and she just doesn't want to fight Cyborg. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
What a disaster. GDR was stripped, and Chris would win the vacant title that everybody already knew belonged to her in the first place. Number 2, Jon Jones. When Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier met for the first time, it truly felt like about to establish the greatest fighter in the world. And light heavyweight champion Jones pretty emphatically showed that he was head and shoulders above the number 2 guy.
Are you calling me short?
Then he crashed into a pregnant lady and bolted, ruining absolutely everything. With Jones stripped and suspended, the UFC had no choice but to put the clearly second best guy Cormier in a vacant title bout with Rumble Johnson, one that DC would win. But with Jones taking himself out of the title picture, even after defeating a very scary contender in Johnson, nobody was looking at Cormier as the real champ. In fact, he was getting booed constantly. Fans were just outright rejecting the notion that DC's title reign held any kind of weight due to the absence of Jones, who was clearly the best fighter on the planet. But Cormier would persevere, and more issues and suspensions for Jones would lead to views on DC to soften. He still wasn't better than Jon, but they didn't hate him as much. The two would finally get a chance to compete again after Jones returned from his second suspension, and again JBJ would win as was expected, until it was overturned because he popped for Turinabol. Jesus Christ, Jon. Number 1, Conor McGregor. It is almost impossible to emphasize enough just how stupidly popular Conor McGregor was a decade ago. After beating one of the greatest champions the sport's ever seen in 13 seconds, McGregor had reached God status among fans. With his ambitions for a second title in another division, nobody could be bothered with maintaining featherweight. Conor would get to that when he wasn't making history, you bums. After his first bout with Nate Diaz, due to his inactivity at 145, an interim title bout was made between former champion Aldo and Frankie Edgar. Conor made sure to be seen looming over the bout from the audience to remind everyone that the interim gold didn't mean a damn thing because the real king was still around. Except he wasn't, and eventually he was stripped, granting Aldo undisputed status. Unfortunately for Aldo, losing one of the highest profile fights ever to McGregor left his new unearned gold feeling hollow. And with his immense popularity, Conor was a shadow over 145's entire title picture. Following Aldo's loss of the gold to Max Holloway, fans were like, oh, you mean that bum that McGregor beat with one leg is holding the title now? Cool. Tell me when the champ's back, because he apologizes to absolutely nobody. It was honestly a very annoying time. But yeah, nobody could establish themselves under these circumstances at 145. It was just impossible for a time. Eventually, in Conor's extended and permanent absence from the division, and with Holloway's continued dominance, with Holloway more than proving to be one of the most legendary champions this sport has ever seen. McGregor's grip on featherweight slowly faded away. Unlike the grip on the YouTube game from editor Max Randall, please follow him on all his socials and go check out his awesome YouTube channel. Another massive thanks to our channel Hall of Famers, and specifically Ben C, who came up with the idea for this list. Fight fans, hit the join button, become a member as well, get exclusive content, and maybe your list idea will be one we make. Like and subscribe, or Conor McGregor will loom over your championship reign. Leave a comment about which of these champions got done the dirtiest, and thank you so much for watching. See you later, guys.